You've arrived at CozySideAudio, where dreams begin with a story. Tonight's tale is here to help you wind down and find peace. If this brings you comfort, please like, share, and subscribe so more dreamers can join us. CozySideAudio presents Morning, Noon, and Neon. Chapter 1. The Alarm Clock Window. The alarm clock rings at 7:02 every morning, not because I set it that way, but because the buttons are sticky and refuse to land on anything even. The red digits glow dimly against the pale wall, their mechanical certainty tugging me from dreams I never remember. I reach across the mattress and silence it with a practiced hand. The room holds its breath, as if the day hesitates before stepping in. For a while I stay there, staring at the ceiling where faint cracks branch like veins. Outside, the city has already begun. Footsteps echo in the hallway. A car engine coughs awake, and the distant hiss of an espresso machine drifts through my open window. I don't move right away. My body feels as if it belongs more to the bed than to me, the blanket clinging with the loyalty of an old friend. Eventually, I swing my legs over the side. The floor is cool, the tiles uneven, one corner chipped from when I dropped a ceramic mug months ago. I never swept it properly. Tiny shards of porcelain still glitter near the baseboard if you look closely. My apartment isn't much, but it's mine, an assortment of mismatched furniture, secondhand books, and a kettle that wheezes louder than a commuter train. The window is the apartment's best feature. It faces east, squarely onto another block of apartments, all nearly identical in shape. The only thing distinguishing them are the curtains people hang, floral, striped, plain white. Mine are thin and beige, bought out of necessity rather than taste. Through them I can see rectangles of light glowing in other lives. Someone 2 floors down waters plants on their balcony, their silhouette careful and unhurried. Another person smokes, leaning against the railing as if the morning air were already heavy. These glimpses make me feel both close to and far from others, like watching a film with the sound turned off. I boil water for instant coffee. The kettle rattles and sighs, its steam fogging the small kitchen window. I lean against the counter and watch as granules dissolve into dark swirls. Coffee is less about taste and more about rhythm. Something about the repeated gesture, the spoon, the steam, the sip, gives the day a frame. Without it, mornings feel unanchored, drifting. I drink by the window, cup warm against my hands, and look at the street below. Delivery trucks unload crates of bottled water. A cyclist swerves around a taxi double-parked with its hazard lights flashing. Pigeons scavenge near a convenience store, their wings lifting in sharp bursts whenever someone walks too close. It's the same scene every morning, yet I keep watching, as though it might surprise me. Breakfast is 2 slices of bread and a thin layer of peanut butter. Sometimes a banana when I remember to buy them. Today, I forgot. I chew slowly, the bread slightly stale, but hunger makes no complaints. My phone vibrates once, a notification from some group chat I never participate in. I swipe it away without reading. The shower sputters before the water runs steady. I stand under it longer than necessary, listening to the pipes groan behind the walls. Soap, shampoo, rinse. A cycle as predictable as the alarm clock's red numbers. I think about how most of my life is made of these small repetitions. Wake, shower, coffee, commute. Yet I cling to them because they are proof of forward motion. Without them, I fear the days would collapse into each other, indistinguishable. By the time I dress, sunlight has begun to slip across the floor, touching the corner of my desk where unopened mail has piled up. Bills, mostly. One postcard from a friend who moved away, the picture of a lake I've never seen. I told myself I'd reply, but the blank side of the card remains untouched. Words feel heavier when they must be written, and I've never known how to balance honesty with brevity. I slip on my shoes by the door. They squeak faintly, the soles worn thin from walking these streets over and over. Before leaving, I glance once more at the apartment. It doesn't change, but I always feel as though I might catch it in some unguarded state, like it might shift or breathe when I'm not looking. Of course, it never does. The hallway smells faintly of detergent and something fried. An elderly neighbor shuffles past with a small plastic bag, nodding without a word. I nod back. Our silence feels polite, as though conversation would be too much weight this early. The elevator hums, reluctant to descend, and I trace the scratches carved into its metal walls. Initials, dates, a heart drawn lopsided, people leaving their small claims to existence. When the doors open, the city greets me not with grandeur but with ordinary insistence. Cars honk, engines rev, vendors shout prices for fresh fruit. The sidewalk is already thick with movement, people in suits and sneakers, each carrying their own invisible urgency. I slip into the current like a pebble dropped into a stream. No one notices, and that anonymity is both comfort and ache. The air carries the faint aroma of bread from a bakery nearby, blending with exhaust and damp pavement. Somewhere, a radio plays faintly, a pop song I don't recognize. I wonder if these sounds will ever become background, or if I will always notice them, cataloging details that don't belong to me. At the crosswalk, I wait with strangers. A woman adjusts her scarf. A man scrolls his phone with a thumb that moves too fast. The light changes and we all step forward as if pulled by the same invisible string. My shadow stretches beside theirs, indistinguishable for a brief second, until the sun shifts and separates us again. I walk on, coffee shop signs flashing neon even in daylight, bicycles weaving between cars, a delivery man balancing a tower of boxes. I keep my pace steady, unhurried, as though walking itself might be the one ritual that steadies me more than any alarm clock ever could. The city doesn't wait, but it doesn't abandon either. It just moves, endless like breath. And I move inside it, a small part of a larger rhythm, still unsure whether I belong to it, or if it belongs to me. Chapter 2. The subway without music. The subway station always smells faintly of iron and wet concrete, no matter the weather above. By the time I descend the steps, the air is cooler, heavier, laced with the scent of old newspapers and something faintly metallic, like coins rubbed between fingers. I buy my ticket without thought. The machine's buttons are worn smooth, plastic dulled by years of pressing. The paper slips out with a mechanical cough, flimsy enough that I worry sometimes it might disintegrate before I reach the gate. Inside the station, the crowd gathers in uneven clusters. Some stand near the edge, leaning forward as if their anticipation could pull the train faster. Others linger against walls, scrolling their phones, their faces lit by pale blue glow. I take a spot somewhere in the middle, neither eager nor indifferent, simply existing until the train arrives. The tunnel exhales before the train comes, a low rumble that grows into a steady roar. Wind rushes ahead of it, lifting strands of hair, tugging at coat hems. Then the silver body screeches into the station, its doors parting like a mouth opening for a conversation no one wants to have. People spill out, people flood in, a brief exchange of lives, and I step forward with them. The carriage is half full. I find a seat near the end, beside a woman in a brown coat who smells faintly of citrus. She clutches a tote bag with a bookstore logo, though she doesn't open it. Across from us, a man dozes with his head tilted back, mouth slightly open, his tie hanging askew. I usually listen to music during the ride, but today my headphones are tangled in my pocket, a knot too stubborn to fight with so early. So I sit without them, hearing the train as it is, the metal grinding against tracks, the rattling windows, the occasional voice over the speaker announcing stops in a muffled monotone. The silence inside my head feels both raw and unsteady, like stepping onto a street after rain and realizing the puddles are deeper than expected. Without music, I notice things. The way advertisements line the carriage walls, whitening toothpaste, discount flights, a new novel plastered with glowing reviews. Someone has drawn a pair of glasses over the model's face with black marker, as if giving her a secret identity. A child seated 2 rows down traces her finger along the window, leaving smudges that resemble constellations. Her mother gently pulls her hand away, whispering something I can't hear. Every time the doors open, cold air rushes in, carrying with it the scent of baked goods from a kiosk above or exhaust from a nearby street. Passengers shift, stand, replace one another. It strikes me that the train is a kind of bloodstream, pumping people from one end of the city to the other, each face a cell performing its quiet function, unseen by the rest. At the third stop, the woman in the brown coat gets up. Her seat is warm when she leaves, a brief human trace quickly cooling. An older man takes her place, his jacket peppered with paint stains, as if he'd been working on a canvas or a wall. He hums softly to himself, off-key but steady. I look at the reflection in the window, the overlay of my own face against the tunnel rushing past. The blur makes me appear both there and not there, caught between surfaces. My features don't hold still. They shift with the flickering lights, as though I'm made of something less solid than skin and bone. Across the aisle, the sleeping man wakes suddenly as the train jerks. He blinks, disoriented, then checks his watch with exaggerated urgency before standing. The doors part, and he steps out into the crowd as if he'd always belonged more to the platform than the seat he left behind. I stay, carried forward, station after station, each one like a heartbeat, regular, mechanical, but alive in its own way. There is comfort in this routine. How the train arrives, whether or not I am waiting, how the seats fill, whether or not I occupy one. Still, I can't help but wonder what it would feel like if someone recognized me in this shifting tide, not by accident or convenience, but because they were looking for me. The thought lingers as the train slows again, brakes squealing. I rise, the crowd pressing close, and step out into the station's hum. My footsteps merge with hundreds of others, a shared rhythm that feels impersonal and intimate at once. Above ground, the city waits, already in motion, and I walk into it, carrying nothing more than the sound of wheels on tracks, fading behind me like the tale of a dream I couldn't keep. Chapter 3. Coffee Steam. The cafe sits on the corner of a narrow street, wedged between a dry cleaner and a shop that sells nothing but novelty phone cases. Its windows fog easily in winter, collecting fingerprints of condensation like faint ghosts pressing their palms against the glass. I come here most mornings, not because the coffee is exceptional, but because the space feels like a pocket of pause in the city's otherwise relentless forward motion. The bell above the door tinkles with a fragile cheer as I push it open. Inside, warmth rushes at me. Freshly ground beans, faintly sweet pastries, the hum of low conversation. A radio near the counter plays music quietly, some old pop ballad whose chorus has been reduced to background static in my memory. There's always a line, though never long. The barista, a man in his 30s with sleeves rolled to the elbow, works with steady rhythm. He doesn't smile much, but his movements carry a kind of grace, scooping grounds, tamping, steaming milk. Watching him is like watching someone fold origami, precise, purposeful, a quiet art in itself. When it's my turn, I order the same thing, an Americano, no sugar. The words slip from me like a script I've rehearsed too often. He nods, scribbles on the cup, and I step aside to wait. Around me, voices rise and fall. A pair of students debating a class project, a woman in a tailored suit reciting an order over the phone, a man typing furiously on his laptop as though the keys were a time bomb. I take my drink when it arrives, warm cardboard pressed into my palms. The first sip scalds, but I don't mind. The bitterness wakes me more effectively than the alarm clock ever could. There are tables by the window, but I rarely sit. Instead, I hover near the counter or lean against the wall, sipping slowly, watching. Through the glass, people hurry by with scarves flung around their necks, their faces blurred in motion. Some glance inside, momentarily catching my gaze before moving on. Each glance feels like an unopened envelope, something delivered but never read. Today, a song plays on the radio that I recognize. Not fully, not by name, but enough that a piece of memory stirs. I can almost picture where I heard it first. Some bar years ago with friends whose faces blur now the way strangers do. I remember laughing then, not at the joke itself, but at the ease of being part of a circle where laughter came freely. The memory ends as abruptly as it begins, like a needle lifted from vinyl mid-chorus. The cup empties faster than I expect. I linger anyway, letting the steam rise in lazy spirals, the last traces of warmth seeping into my hands. There's something about steam, how it exists only for a breath before fading, that reminds me of the city itself. Ephemeral, shifting, impossible to hold. A woman near the counter laughs suddenly, the sound spilling into the cafe like sunlight breaking through a curtain. I look without meaning to. She's holding a book, its cover folded back, her finger marking the page. She's laughing at something she's just read. I feel a brief, sharp envy of that private joy, the ability to find amusement alone, without the world's permission. For a moment, I imagine walking over, asking about the book. A simple question, nothing more. But the thought withers before it forms. Instead, I throw away my cup and leave, the bell above the door chiming me back into the street. Outside, the air is cooler, edged with exhaust from passing buses. The warmth of the cafe clings to me for a few steps, then fades. My reflection catches in a shop window as I walk, a figure with coffee-stained breath and nothing remarkable to say. Still, I keep coming back to that moment. The sound of laughter spilling into steam, the sight of a stranger holding joy in her hands. It lingers like an aftertaste. Chapter 4. Lunch bench, pigeons. By noon, the city has already stretched itself thin. The morning rush has bled into office hours, and streets wear a different kind of noise, less frantic, more sustained, like a violin bow drawn slowly across strings. I carry my lunch in a paper bag, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, an apple bruised from rolling around in the fridge, a small bottle of water. It isn't much, but I prefer eating outside, away from the fluorescent hum of the office. The park near the square offers benches that face a fountain, and though it's not large, it feels like a reprieve. The bench I choose is half in shade, half in sun. A tree leans above, its branches swaying faintly as though the leaves were whispering among themselves. I unwrap the sandwich slowly, careful not to let the bread fall apart, and bite into it. The taste is plain, bread, cheese, lettuce, but the air adds something extra, a seasoning only absence of walls can provide. Around me, the park is its own small ecosystem. Pigeons strut with the confidence of landowners, pecking at crumbs, occasionally lifting into clumsy bursts of flight. A group of children chase one another around the fountain, their laughter ricocheting against the stone. Office workers sit in clusters, ties loosened, chopsticks clicking against plastic containers. Everyone belongs to someone else's lunch hour. I sit alone, but not lonely. Not exactly. More like a satellite observing from a quiet orbit. A man on the bench opposite reads a newspaper, his glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose. Every so often he mutters at an article, shaking his head as though debating with the page. Beside him, a woman eats a salad from a clear container, her fork movements precise, almost meditative. She doesn't look up once. The pigeons edge closer when I drop a crumb. One tilts its head, eyes sharp and unblinking, as if weighing the generosity of my offering. I give another piece, then another, until there's a small gathering at my feet. The flutter of wings is oddly soothing, the sound of feathers against air like pages turning quickly. Somewhere nearby, a busker strums a guitar. The melody is simple, repetitive, but it threads itself through the park's noise, fountain water splashing and children laughing, conversations overlapping. For a moment, it feels as though all of it belongs to the same song, each sound an instrument in a performance no one is conducting. I take a bite of apple, its sweetness slightly muted by the bruise. As I chew, I catch fragments of dialogue drifting across the benches. A woman complains about her boss. Two students discuss an exam, their voices quick, restless. Someone laughs too loudly into a phone, the sound cutting through everything like a dropped glass. These fragments never finish, always cut off by distance or interruption, but I find myself piecing them together, imagining endings. Perhaps the woman will quit her job. Perhaps the students will pass. Perhaps the laughter will soften once the call ends. The city is built on unfinished sentences, left for anyone to complete. The sun shifts gradually, and the shadow of the tree creeps closer to my side of the bench. I watch it move, slow but insistent, a reminder that even in stillness, time leaks forward. When my sandwich is gone and only the apple core remains, I toss it into the trash bin nearby. The pigeons scatter in protest, wings flaring, only to regroup a moment later as if nothing had happened. Before leaving, I sit a little longer, watching the fountain spray catch sunlight in arcs that break into prisms. People pass by, faces I won't see again, voices I'll forget before dinner. And yet, for this half hour, they are part of the same quiet circle as me. It strikes me, not for the first time, that the city is less a place and more a pattern, a series of fleeting overlaps, brief convergences that vanish almost as soon as they happen. When I stand, brushing crumbs from my lap, I feel lighter somehow. The paper bag crumpled in my hand, the bench behind me, the pigeons resuming their reign. I step back into the current of the street and the park folds itself closed like a page turned in a book no one else is reading. Chapter 5. A voice in the bookstore. The bookstore is not large. It hides on the second floor of a building that also houses a nail salon and a shop that repairs watches. If you didn't know it was there, you might pass by 100 times without noticing the narrow staircase that leads up to it. The sign outside is faded, blue paint chipped, letters peeling, but the door above opens to shelves lined with spines like teeth in a wide, quiet smile. I stop there sometimes after work, not because I need another book, but because the air inside feels thicker, as if the world slows down once you cross the threshold. The floor creaks, the kind of creak that announces your presence even when you try to move carefully. The clerk sits behind the counter, usually with a book open in her hands. She looks to be around my age, maybe younger, her hair pulled back loosely, a pencil sometimes tucked above her ear. She doesn't greet loudly, only raises her eyes briefly, the corners of her mouth tipping into the faintest suggestion of acknowledgement. I wander the shelves, fingers brushing along titles. There's no particular book I'm searching for, but the act of searching itself feels like a ritual. Pages whisper when I lift them, the smell of paper soft and steady and like breathing. Today, one title catches me, a collection of short stories by an author I've read before. I pull it out and study the cover, its edges curled, the price scrawled in pencil on the inside. You've read him before? Her voice is quiet, carrying easily across the shelves. I glance up, surprised, the book still open in my hands. Once, I say. A different collection. Years ago. She nods, closing the book on her lap with one hand. He writes like he's talking to himself. Some people don't like that, but I think it makes his stories feel honest. I hesitate, then smile slightly. That's exactly how it felt. Like reading someone's private thoughts. Her eyes flicker, the faintest spark of agreement. This one is better than the others. Less polished, but closer to the bone, if you like that sort of thing. I turn the book over in my hands, weighing her words as though they add literal weight. The cover illustration, a quiet street at dusk, reminds me of somewhere I can't quite place. I'll take it, I hear myself say, though I hadn't planned on buying anything. At the counter, she rings it up with slow precision, sliding the book into a thin paper bag. The register beeps faintly, the drawer clicking open. When she hands me the bag, her fingers brush mine for a moment, light as paper edges. Enjoy it, she says. Not cheerfully, not out of obligation, simply as if the words themselves belong to the book and she is only passing them along. I nod. Thanks. The exchange is over, ordinary by every measure. I leave, the bell above the door giving its brittle chime. Outside, the city continues without pause. Traffic lights changing, a bus lumbering past, someone shouting into a phone. Yet I walk with the faint sensation of having been altered, not in any dramatic way, but in some quiet corner where change begins. The book presses warm against my palm through the bag. I think about her voice, low, deliberate, carrying a kind of weight that outlasts the words themselves. At home, I place the book on my desk without opening it. Sometimes it feels better to let a thing wait, to preserve the moment of possibility just a little longer. And yet, as I go about the rest of the evening, I find myself replaying the conversation, as though those few sentences were written not only on paper, but somewhere deeper, in a space I can't quite name. Chapter 6. Rain on Side Streets. The morning had been clear, sky rinsed pale blue, but by late afternoon clouds gathered thickly, rolling in from the west like smoke. I noticed them while walking home, the edges of buildings softened by the dim light, the air taking on that heavy stillness that warns of rain before the first drop falls. It comes suddenly, a cold splash on my sleeve, then another, and within seconds the street is a blur of umbrellas opening like startled wings. I don't carry one. I never do. Instead, I duck into the narrow cover of an awning outside a closed tailor shop, its faded sign rattling faintly in the wind. The rain hammers down, hard enough to wash the colors from the street. Cars hiss past, tires cutting through waterlogged asphalt. People hurry by in frantic diagonals, newspapers held above their heads, jackets pulled tight. The city, normally so certain in its rhythm, stumbles under weather's insistence. I'm not alone under the awning. A man stands there already, mid-30s perhaps, though rain makes it difficult to tell. His jacket is damp at the shoulders, hair plastered flat. He glances at me briefly, then back at the street. "Didn't think it'd hit this fast," he says, voice casual, as though we've known each other longer than the few seconds it's been. "No," I reply. "The sky didn't give much warning." He chuckles softly, shifting the bag in his hand. Inside, I catch a glimpse of produce, green onions sticking out, a carton of eggs cradled carefully. "Figures I'd picked today to shop. Should have trusted the old guy at the stall. He said rain was coming." "Sometimes the old guys know better than the forecast," I say. The man smiles, nodding. We both watch the rain pour down, its surface relentless, like beads strung together without pause. For a moment, silence stretches, but it's not uncomfortable. Just the two of us, sharing a pause between storms. "City looks different in weather like this," he says after a while. "Makes you notice things you don't when the sun's out." I follow his gaze. The neon sign across the street flickers brighter against the gray, its letters smeared by rain streaking the glass. Water gushes into the gutter, swirling with leaves and cigarette butts. A woman splashes past in red shoes, their color almost startling against the wet concrete. "Different," I echo. "But not worse." He glances at me again, eyes narrowing as though considering the thought, then nods. "Not worse. Just more honest, maybe." The rain softens gradually, the furious drumming easing into a steady patter. The man straightens, adjusting the bag of groceries. "Guess that's my cue," he says, half smiling. I nod. "Good luck with the eggs." "Thanks," he replies, stepping out into the damp air. His figure blends quickly into the movement of umbrellas and wet jackets, absorbed by the city as if he'd never been there. I stay a little longer under the awning, listening to the rain lose its urgency. The street shimmers, every surface reflecting light in fractured patterns. A bus sighs to a stop, doors opening, and the smell of wet pavement and exhaust drifts my way. When I finally step out, my shoes splash through shallow puddles. The storm is nearly over, but the city feels altered, rinsed raw. I walk on, carrying not just the damp on my clothes, but the faint echo of a voice, casual, ordinary, yet somehow grounding. It fades quickly, like rain drying on skin. But even as I reach my apartment, I find myself thinking of his words. More honest, maybe. Chapter 7. Familiar faces in unexpected places. It begins with the sound of my name, quiet, almost hesitant, floating across the air in the bookstore. I'm standing in the corner aisle, running my fingers along the spines of used paperbacks, their covers softened from passing through too many hands. The bell above the door has just rung, signaling another customer, but I don't look up until the syllables land. "Hey, is that you?" I turn. For a moment I can't place them. The city is full of half-familiar faces, shapes I might know from a train, or voices I might have overheard once in a cafe. But then it settles. The jawline. The eyes. A flash of memory so sudden it almost stings. It's Haruto. We sat next to each other in literature class, back in our final year of high school. He used to sketch on the edges of his notebook instead of taking notes, always half-turned toward the window, watching clouds. I remember thinking he didn't quite belong in the noise of the classroom, though he always managed to laugh at the right moments. To get along. Haruto? I say, and the sound of it makes him smile in recognition. Yeah, wow, I wasn't sure. It's been, 6 years? About that, I reply, though the number feels slippery in my head. Time folds strangely when it's attached to people you don't expect to see again. We laugh awkwardly, the kind of laugh meant to cover how strange it feels. The bookstore is quiet around us, save for the low hum of the clerk's radio drifting from behind the counter. I thought you moved away, I say. I did. College out west, but, work brings you back. The city's got its pull. He gestures at the shelves. Didn't expect to find you here, though. You still reading the way you used to? I shrug, glancing down at the books. Trying to. These days it's more magazines and notes on my phone. Feels harder to give hours to a single thing. He grins. Yeah, same here. Life eats up the time before you even notice. We end up drifting to the little cafe corner tucked at the back of the shop, cups of weak coffee steaming between us. Conversation stumbles at first, but then it finds a rhythm, pulling threads from old fabric. Names of classmates, the teacher who always wore mismatched socks, the endless exams that felt like the end of the world. I used to think the city would feel enormous, he says at one point, staring into his cup. That everyone would scatter and we'd never cross paths again. But here we are. It still feels enormous, I reply. Maybe that's why this feels so unlikely. Haruto nods. His expression shifts, softer now. Funny how even unlikely things happen when you're not trying. Like, maybe the city's not as careless as it seems. We leave together, stepping into the cool evening air. Streetlights blink awake, haloed by the lingering damp of yesterday's rain. We walk a few blocks in the same direction, conversations stretching thinner, until the intersection where we part. Well, he says, smiling but uncertain, I guess I'll see you around. The phrase hangs in the air, not a promise, but not nothing either. Yeah, I say, see you around. And then he's gone, swallowed by the current of pedestrians, the city taking him back. But unlike before, I don't feel the sharpness of disappearance. Instead, there's a trace of warmth, as though the city has whispered, see? Not everything is lost. I walk the rest of the way home with that small warmth in my pocket, like a note I've forgotten to read but know is waiting. Chapter 8. The map that wouldn't fold. The city had a way of making strangers visible. Not in the way it made its residents visible, subtly, in passing, only in fragments, but in the way it seemed to spotlight the lost. You could tell by the way they paused too long on the corner, or how their eyes flicked between buildings as though expecting landmarks to rearrange themselves. That afternoon, I spot one such stranger in the plaza by the fountain. A tourist, clutching a paper map so wide it threatens to collapse under its own folds. People stream past, indifferent, the way the city teaches you to be. But something makes me stop. Need some help? I ask. The tourist looks up, startled. Mid-30s maybe, a travel-worn backpack slung across his shoulders, camera strap dangling loosely. His relief is immediate. Ah, yes, thank you. I'm looking for the railway museum. I've been walking in circles. His accent is thick, but his words careful, as though he's practiced them just for this question. I know the place. It's tucked 2 streets behind the old tram line, easy to miss unless you already knew where it waited. I could give directions, point vaguely, then move along, but instead I say, I'm heading that way. Want me to walk you there? The map crumples gratefully back into his bag. That would be wonderful. We fall into step, the fountain spray receding behind us. He walks with the restless energy of someone afraid of wasting a single minute, eyes darting from storefronts to rooftops as if cataloging everything. "First time here?" I ask. "First time anywhere outside my country, actually." His voice carries both pride and nervousness. It's overwhelming. The streets feel alive in a way I didn't expect. Back home, everything's quieter. I nod. I remember feeling that. When I first moved here, it felt like the city was speaking in a language I couldn't quite understand. He laughs softly. Yes, like I'm always one step behind the conversation. We turn onto a narrower street where the buildings lean closer together. Laundry sways from second-floor balconies. A cat leaps onto a low wall, watching us pass. He tells me about the photos he wants to take, rusted train engines, the texture of history in metal and steam. Everyone else photographs the skyline, he says, but I want to take home something smaller, something real. I smile at that. The city is full of small, real things, but you only notice them when you're willing to look past the noise. When the museum finally appears, its brick facade weathered but welcoming, his eyes light up as though he's found treasure. "Here it is," I say. He bows his head slightly, gratitude clear even without words. "You saved me an hour of wandering." "It wasn't any trouble," I reply, but the truth is it felt more than that. It felt like stepping into the role I once longed for, a guide, someone to say, "This way, you're not as lost as you think." Before he disappears through the museum doors, he presses a small card into my hand. His email, scribbled in careful letters. "In case you ever visit my country," he says with a smile. I tuck it into my pocket, not knowing if I'll ever use it. But walking away, I feel lighter. The city, which once felt like a maze designed to keep me out, has quietly shifted. For the first time, I'm not only surviving its streets, I'm showing them to someone else. And that feels like a kind of belonging. Chapter 9. Umbrella weather. The rain comes without warning. One moment, the sky is a pale stretch of gray, clouds hanging but undecided. The next, it breaks wide open, a sheet of water rushing against the pavement with the steady insistence of something long held back. I don't have an umbrella. I never do. In my mind, umbrellas are the sort of thing other people remember. Organized, prepared people. I'm always the one sprinting across streets, jacket pulled over my head, shoes squelching hours afterward. The bus stop awning is already crowded. Commuters pressed shoulder to shoulder, a blur of umbrellas opening and closing like mechanical flowers. I stand at the edge, half sheltered, rain spattering my arms, my face. It feels pointless to push further in. Then a voice, low but clear. "You'll get soaked out here." I turn. A woman is standing just to my left, her umbrella tilted generously toward me. She looks to be around my age, maybe a little older, hair pulled back in a messy knot. Her coat is practical, boots damp at the edges. She smiles, not in a way that demands anything, but simply offers space. For a moment I hesitate, the instinct to decline, to say I'm fine, to not impose. But the rain is unrelenting, and her gesture so casual it feels ruder to refuse. I step a little closer, and the umbrella shifts easily to cover us both. "Thanks," I murmur. "Don't mention it," she replies, adjusting her grip. Water trickles off the umbrella's edge in clear streams, splashing the curb. We stand in that suspended bubble, two strangers under the same small circle of shelter, while the world thrashes around us. It feels oddly intimate, not romantic exactly, but tender in its simplicity. "You live here?" she asks after a moment. "Yeah, couple of years now." She nods. "Me too. Still feels like I'm finding my footing sometimes. Streets change, cafes close, new ones open. It's like trying to catch up with someone who keeps walking just a little too fast." I laugh softly. I know that feeling. Our words drift in and out, punctuated by silence that isn't uncomfortable. Just the hiss of rain on pavement, the splash of tires in puddles, the occasional gust of wind that shakes droplets loose from the umbrella's fabric. When the bus finally pulls up, people shuffle forward in a damp procession. I think that's the end of it, that we'll board separately, and this small moment will vanish as quickly as it arrived. But as I step toward the doors, she taps my arm lightly. Here. She presses something into my hand. A folded slip of paper torn from a notepad. Her name. A phone number. In case you ever forget your umbrella again. I glance up, startled by the generosity tucked inside her grin. Before I can say more, she's already moving onto the bus, umbrella shaking droplets like a dog shedding water. I follow, clutching the paper, heart warmed in a way that feels disproportionate to the act itself. But it isn't. Because it isn't just about being spared from rain, it's about someone deciding, even for a moment, that I was worth the space under their umbrella. Later, when I'm home and the storm has dwindled to a drizzle, I pin the slip of paper to my corkboard. It feels like proof that even in a city designed to keep people moving, sometimes you're allowed to pause long enough to share cover. And maybe, just maybe, someone will pause for you again. Chapter 10. Fire Escape Evenings. The knock on the door is light, tentative, the kind that seems to ask permission before it intrudes. I'm halfway through arranging a small stack of books, their spines uneven like a miniature city skyline, when I hear it. Opening the door, I find the neighbor from 2 floors down, a woman in her late 20s, hair tucked under a scarf, holding a small tray with 2 steaming mugs. She smiles, the kind that curves without exaggeration, natural and easy. "I hope this isn't too forward," she says. "I thought you might like some company. Tea? Or cocoa?" I'm startled. Not by the gesture, it's sweet, even a little bold, but by the feeling that someone sees me in the city, notices me enough to think, maybe they'd like this. Tea sounds perfect, I manage, stepping aside to let her in. We sit on the fire escape, legs dangling over the edge, mugs cradled between our hands. The city spreads below us, a quilt of brick, asphalt, and muted neon. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails softly, fading into the hum of evening traffic. "It's strange," she says, swirling the liquid in her cup. "Living so close and yet never crossing paths. I've seen you in the stairwell sometimes, but we never talked." "I know what you mean," I reply. "It feels like the city is full of people who brush past, familiar and strange all at once." She laughs, a short, bright sound. "Exactly. Like ghosts almost. But friendly ones, maybe." For the next hour, conversation drifts easily, unforced. We talk about the building, its quirks, the neighbor who always leaves their music too loud, the creaky pipes that announce themselves at odd hours. Then about the city. Favorite cafes, little streets tucked between avenues, shops that sell nothing but postcards. Somewhere between the third sip of tea and a shared laugh over a burnt-out streetlight, I realize I've been holding my breath without noticing. The city's chaos feels less pressing here, buffered by her presence. "I sometimes come out here after work," she says, leaning back against the railing. "Just to watch the lights, the people moving. It makes everything feel manageable." I nod. I do something similar. It's grounding. The fire escape becomes a quiet world of its own. Rain from earlier has left the metal slightly slick, and the faint smell of wet concrete mingles with the tea. Above, the sky darkens, stars hidden behind clouds, but the glow of the city is enough. When she eventually leaves, she presses the empty tray lightly into my hands. "I'll come by again," she says. Not a promise, not a demand, simply a note of intention. "Please do," I say, though the words feel small compared to the way it settles in my chest. The warmth of being seen, of existing in someone else's orbit without effort. I close the door behind her, and for the first time in a while, the apartment feels less like a shell and more like a home. The city outside still hums its endless song, but now, in its rhythm, I hear echoes of connection. I realize that belonging doesn't always arrive with fanfare or dramatic change. Sometimes it comes in small increments, shared tea, laughter, acknowledgement, a promise to return. And sometimes those increments are enough to tilt the world just slightly, enough to make you feel for a moment that you're part of something larger than yourself. Chapter 11. Threads Between Streets. The city has a rhythm, though it's not one I can hear all at once. It reveals itself in fragments: the click of shoes on wet pavement, the hum of a bus engine, the soft hiss of a fountain. And lately, I've begun to notice something else: a subtle pattern, almost invisible, stitched between the lives that brush past mine. I remember the bookstore clerk, her voice low, precise, leaving words in the air that cling long after I leave. I remember Haruto and the warmth of conversation that made old classrooms, old streets, feel alive again. The tourist, wide-eyed and anxious, grateful for a path through unfamiliar streets. The umbrella, shared without expectation, a fleeting act that lingered like a small talisman. And the neighbor, tea in hand, showing me the view from the fire escape, making the building feel less like a shell and more like a home. Walking through the streets now, I notice the echoes. A glance here, a sound there, reminders of those moments, reminders that the city is not empty, that the spaces I inhabit carry traces of others, and that in turn, I leave traces of myself. I pause outside the cafe, watching the fogged windows blur the shapes of people inside. The bell above the door jingles as someone enters. I imagine the faint warmth of the counter, the smell of coffee, the weight of steam in the air. Somewhere, perhaps, a reflection of my own quiet presence is mirrored back by another visitor, unaware but connected. At the corner, the fountain sprays in arcs. Sunlight, or what passes for sunlight on a late afternoon, splintering into tiny prisms. Children run through the water, pigeons scatter, and I can almost hear the faint echoes of laughter from months ago, from moments I never thought would matter. But they do. I find myself taking small turns through streets I once considered routine, noticing things I've always overlooked: the pattern of tiles outside a bakery, the way neon hums over a closed shop, a sign swinging in the wind above a shuttered doorway. Each fragment, each detail, is a thread, and as I walk, I sense them intertwining, threads that connect not only buildings, streets, and parks, but people, me included. I stop at the bridge spanning the canal, leaning on the railing. Water flows beneath, unhurried, carrying reflections of everything above it. A barge drifts past, its surface rippling, and in it, I see the sum of all the encounters I've carried, the words, gestures, silences that have quietly altered the texture of my days. For a long while, I simply watch, breathing in the cool air, listening to the city speak in the language it has only recently begun to teach me. And for the first time, I realize something subtle but undeniable. These moments, small and seemingly inconsequential, have grown into something that matters. They have woven me into the city. Not through spectacle, not through drama, but through the quiet accumulation of presence: a smile, a shared umbrella, a conversation over tea, the faint acknowledgement of strangers who might never know how much they mattered. And as I turn to walk home, I feel it. Something steady, gentle, enduring, a sense of belonging that has been built one small human thread at a time. The city continues, of course. Cars hum, streetlights flicker, neon pulses, and yet, in that movement, I am not invisible. I am part of it. For the first time, I understand that survival in this city is not enough. Being here, quietly, observing, sharing, connecting in the smallest ways, is how you become woven into it. And that is enough. Chapter 12. Evening lanterns. The city at dusk is a different creature than it is in daylight. Morning streets hum with the energy of obligation, afternoon corners bristle with errands. But evening, there's a softness to it, as if the buildings themselves have exhaled. Windows glow with warm light, spilling rectangles of gold onto wet pavement. Neon flickers faintly, buzzing low and intimate, not demanding attention but offering it to anyone willing to look. I walk slowly tonight, letting my hands slide into my coat pockets. The air smells faintly of rain, asphalt, and fried food from the street carts that have begun setting up at the intersections. Somewhere, a piano strains from an open window, I can't tell if it's practice or performance, but it doesn't matter. Music floats through the alleys, threading into the ambient hum of exhaust and distant laughter, and I find myself listening as though it carries some secret meant only for me. A bookstore window catches my eye. Inside, the clerk smiles faintly at me as she stacks returned books. I raise a hand, not to speak, but as a greeting, a simple acknowledgement of presence. She nods, and I continue walking. Small as it is, the gesture resonates. We are strangers, but not quite. A thread runs between us now, one of recognition and quiet understanding. Turning a corner, I nearly bump into Haruto. Our laughter is easy this time, the kind that doesn't need explanation. He is heading in the same direction, just out for a stroll like I am, carrying an invisible familiarity that makes the city feel smaller, warmer. Evening looks better than I remember, he says, voice low, blending with the whisper of the wind. I nod. It's softer, less urgent, like the city can pause, if only for a little while. We walk together for a few blocks, parallel streams of thought converging silently. Then, with a casual nod, he splits off toward his own street. And again, the city swallows him, but the sense of presence remains. I continue to the small park by the canal. Lanterns have been strung along the pathways, casting pools of amber light across the gravel. Couples walk hand in hand, children dash between shadows. An old man feeds the pigeons, tossing crumbs with deliberate, patient hands. I find a bench, let myself sink into it, and take in the view. The water glimmers like molten glass, reflecting the kaleidoscope of windows, lanterns, and neon. The neighbor from the fire escape passes below, carrying groceries home. She glances up and waves. I wave back. These gestures, tiny, ordinary, carry weight. A reminder that I am threaded into multiple lives, none of them mine alone. I take out the book I bought from the bookstore weeks ago, now partially dog-eared, the pages faintly smelling of coffee and paper. I open it, not to read, but to trace the words with my finger, letting them anchor me. The stories within feel like a whisper, a voice that has existed elsewhere in time, now here, part of my evening ritual. A gentle wind stirs and a few cherry blossoms, or perhaps the remnants of spring, flutter along the path. A busker sets up on the far side of the park, his guitar case open, a hat beside it with coins already scattered in anticipation. He plays softly, the notes stretching lazily into the darkening sky, blending with the distant hum of traffic and the chatter of strangers. I watch the people passing, seeing them as constellations rather than individuals. Someone laughing too loudly, a hand brushing against a shoulder, and a dog barking at its own reflection in the canal. Each movement is ordinary, yet beautiful in its ordinariness, and I too am a part of it. An unremarkable node in the mesh of the city, yet present, visible, alive. Somewhere deep inside, a subtle warmth grows. Not a fire roaring, not a dramatic illumination, but a glow, steady, small, intimate. The sum of all the tiny connections, the bookstore clerk, Haruto, the tourist, the umbrella, the neighbor, settles like sediment in the riverbed of my days. And in it, I recognize myself, no longer just an observer, but a participant. I stay on the bench long after the busker packs up, long after most passers-by have vanished into the night. The lanterns sway gently above me, their light soft on my skin, the city breathing around me. I trace the reflections in the water, each flicker a memory of laughter, conversation, shared space, kindness. When I finally rise, the evening feels less like a curtain closing and more like a stage illuminated for quiet acts of living. My footsteps echo softly on the gravel, fading into the city's deeper hum. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails, a bell chimes, tires hiss across wet pavement. But these sounds no longer feel intrusive. They are part of the melody I now understand. Walking home, I glance up at the apartment buildings I pass, their windows glowing with fragments of other lives. And for the first time it occurs to me, The city has folded me into itself, not forcibly, not suddenly, but patiently, quietly, through the accumulation of small human moments. I open my door and step inside. The room smells faintly of tea and paper, of streets rinsed clean by yesterday's rain. And I smile, knowing that tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, the city will continue in its chaotic rhythm, and I will continue, woven into it, part of it, finally, at home. Chapter 13. Morning, noon, and neon. The city wakes slowly, even in ways that seem unnoticed. Morning light stretches across the rooftops, spilling between buildings, glinting off windows, and igniting the edges of signs just beginning to flicker with electricity. Birds are already calling somewhere. A soft, irregular chorus that competes with the low rumble of buses and delivery trucks. I step out onto my balcony, holding a cup of tea. Steam rises and curls in the pale morning air, carrying the faint scent of wet concrete and last night's rain. The streets below are just beginning to pulse with movement. Delivery bikes weaving through lanes, shopkeepers flipping signs to open, early commuters hurrying with faces half lit by the first light. I take a slow breath, listening to it all. The city hums in its own language, one I've learned to hear in fragments. The rhythm of footsteps on wet pavement, the muted chime of a distant bell, the faint hiss of a tram braking around the corner. And in those fragments, I recognize a pattern, a network of presence and connection, invisible and undeniable. I think of the bookstore clerk, arranging spines and murmuring words that lingered long after I left. I think of Haruto, whose easy laughter reminded me that time can fold back on itself, reconnecting lives once thought separate. The tourist, briefly dependent on my small knowledge of streets, left behind a reminder that even fleeting kindness matters. The umbrella, the neighbor, small acts and gestures of care, ordinary and yet transformative. The city itself feels like a collection of these moments, like the sum of every gesture, glance, and voice that has brushed against me. It is alive, breathing, observing, responding, not as a distant backdrop, but as a participant in my own unfolding life. I walk down the narrow streets, taking the long route to the little cafe I've begun visiting more often. The bell jingles as I enter, warm air brushing against my skin, the smell of coffee mingling with baked bread. The barista nods at me, a small recognition that feels like an embrace. I smile in return. Outside, the sunlight catches the wet pavement from last night's rain, scattering shards of reflected light. A busker strums a soft melody on guitar, and for a moment the city seems to pause, leaning in to listen. I sit at a corner table, opening the book from the bookstore, its pages worn slightly, holding the weight of my growing collection of moments. Across the street, the neighbor waves from her window, teacup in hand. I wave back. Somewhere, Haruto passes on his way to work, nodding faintly, and I feel the echo of laughter even before it reaches me. The tourist card still rests on my corkboard, a quiet reminder that connections can span distance and time. I sip my tea and let the sun warm my face. The city moves around me, cars, bicycles, chatter, footsteps, but I am no longer separate from it. I am threaded into it, as integral as the worn stones under my feet, as ordinary and essential as the flicker of neon outside a corner shop at midnight. The clock strikes noon. Somewhere a bell rings, a bus rumbles past, a storefront door creaks open. The small symphony of life continues, uninterrupted, and I realize that I do not need to chase belonging or search for significance. It is here, in the accumulation of ordinary acts, in the subtle recognition of strangers, in quiet laughter and shared shelter. The sun dips lower, and neon begins to glow faintly in preparation for evening. I watch the colors spread across the streets, spilling into alleyways, reflecting in puddles. The city is alive, yes, but it is alive with me in it. And for the first time in as long as I can remember, I feel no need to be anywhere else, no urgency to move faster or reach further. I am part of this city. The city is part of me. Morning, noon, and neon, each moment threaded with life, connection, and the quiet, enduring warmth of belonging. I lean back in my chair, closing the book for a moment and smile. The streets hum, the lights pulse, and I breathe in a city that is no longer just a backdrop, but a living, breathing companion in the small, miraculous act of being here. And in that presence, I am home. Thanks for listening, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.